They slapped the girls but in class. Big mistake. She was a deadly boxer. But no one knew. Not yet. Her name was Ava Moreno, and she walked the halls of Northgate High like a ghost in a gray hoodie. The hoodie was her armor, her invisibility cloak. Head down, she kept her eyes on the scuffed linoleum, but her awareness was a radar, constantly sweeping the environment. She wasn't just walking, she was navigating. She knew the echo patterns in the West Wing, the exact spot near the science labs where the floorboards creaked, the way the light from the tall windows created blind spots by the main office. She charted the school not like a student, but like a fighter studying the dimensions of a ring before the first bell, memorizing every advantage, every trap. The noise in her head was a relentless replay, a jagged shard of memory. It wasn't just a fight, it was a cascade of failures. The memory began with the sharp, metallic clang of a locker door slamming against the wall. Then the terrified whimper of her friend, Sarah, pinned against the cold metal by a boy named Mark. He was bigger, a basketball player with a mean streak, and his laughter was ugly. "What's the matter, Sarah? Can't take a joke?" he'd sneered, his hand sliding down her arm. Ava's voice, low and steady, "Let her go, Mark." Mark had turned, his face a mask of arrogant surprise. "Or what, Moreno? You gonna do something?" He'd taken a step toward her. "I've seen you in the gym with your dad. You think you're tough?" That was the mistake. He hadn't threatened her. He had belittled the one pure thing in her life. The discipline. The art. In that moment, all the rules her father had taught her about control had evaporated. What was left was pure, unthinking instinct. A pivot. A jab. The slick, wet sound of her fists connecting with his mouth. A boy's cry, high and surprised, followed by the sight of blood blooming on his lip, a dark flower of her own making. The shock in his eyes was quickly replaced by fear. She hadn't felt powerful. She'd felt sick. Then came the other images, the fallout. The principal's office with its smell of stale coffee and disappointment. The expulsion letter, a single white sheet of paper that felt heavier than a tombstone, shaking in her mother's hand. And worst of all, her father's face. He wasn't angry. He was quiet. That profound, heavy silence was a condemnation that hurt more than any punishment. It said, "I taught you control and you chose chaos." So this was her penance. Northgate High. A new school, a new town. A clean slate she was determined to keep blank. No attention. No friends. No trouble. And above all, no boxing. The power that lived in her hands, that hummed under her skin like a low-voltage current, had to stay dormant. It was a beast and she was its wary keeper. At lunch, she found her usual spot, an empty table at the far end of the cafeteria, a small, forgotten island in a roaring sea of teenage noise. The air was thick with the cloying smells of greasy pizza and cheap body spray. She unwrapped her sandwich, her eyes glued to the page of a book she wasn't reading. It was just a prop, another layer of her camouflage. "This seat taken?" Ava looked up, startled out of her reverie. A girl with bright, inquisitive eyes and a confident smile stood there, holding a lunch tray. Her hair was styled in intricate braids that fell over the shoulder of a t-shirt that said, "Speak your mind, even if your voice shakes." It was Sky. Ava gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "It's free." Sky sat down, her presence a splash of color in Ava's gray world. She was undeterred by Ava's closed-off energy. "I'm Sky. You're the new girl, right?" "Ava." Ava nodded, taking a small, calculated bite of her sandwich. "Yeah. Cool. Well, welcome to the jungle," Sky said with a wry grin. "It's not as bad as it looks. You just have to know who to avoid." She subtly nodded her head toward a table of loud, laughing boys in varsity jackets. They were arranged around their king, a handsome boy with an arrogant tilt to his chin. Trent Walker. "See them? That's the royal court. And he's the king. My advice? Stay clear of the hyenas." Ava's gaze lingered on them. She'd already clocked them on her first day. They moved with the lazy, entitled confidence of predators who knew they were at the top of the food chain. She'd overheard them in the hallway that morning, their voices slick with a casual cruelty. They were joking about tripping a freshman, replaying the video on Nash's phone and howling with laughter. A cold, familiar knot formed in Ava's stomach. Her hand, hidden under the table, slowly curled into a fist, her knuckles pressing into her palm. She felt the old, familiar fire begin to smolder deep inside her. The urge to walk over there to do something. But she fought it down, smothering the flame before it could catch. She remembered her mother's tears. Her father's silence. Not my fight, she chanted to herself, a mantra of survival. Not anymore. She took another bite of her sandwich, broke eye contact with Sky, and retreated behind the wall of her book. She just had to endure. Keep her head down. And walk on. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in avoidance. Ava became an expert at fading into the background. But in a school like Northgate, invisibility was a challenge. Trent's crew had an almost animalistic sense for anyone who didn't belong, for anyone who was quiet, different, or vulnerable. And Ava, with her silent watchfulness and her ever-present hoodie, was an irresistible puzzle. It began with a shoulder check in the crowded hallway between second and third period. It was Nash. He was lanky and moved with a restless, twitchy energy. He veered directly into her path. Ava, sensing it a second before it happened, braced herself, her core tight. She absorbed the impact without stumbling, her feet planted like roots. Nash bounced off her slightly, surprised by her solidity. He turned, a sneer twisting his lips. "Watch where you're going," he spat, even though he was the one at fault. Ava just adjusted her backpack and kept walking, her heart pounding a steady, controlled rhythm. Another time it was Cooper, the quietest of the group, the one who just watched. She was at her locker, trying to work the stubborn combination. He walked by and, with a flick of his wrist, knocked her history textbook out of her hands. It hit the floor with a loud slap. He offered a short, nervous laugh and scurried off to join his friends, who high-fived him for his daring. Ava knelt, her movements calm and deliberate, and picked up her book. She could feel the eyes on her, a mix of pity and amusement. She hated both. Sky saw it happen from down the hall. She stormed over, her own face flushed with anger. "You can't just let them do that, Ava. You have to say something." "Saying something is what they want," Ava replied, her voice flat. She was focused on the combination of her lock. 14. 28. 5. Click. The lock opened. "They want a reaction. I'm not giving them one." "So you're just going to be their personal punching bag?" Sky demanded, leaning against the neighboring locker. "Sometimes staying silent is the same as letting them win. It tells them it's okay to keep going." Ava finally turned and looked at her, her dark eyes holding a depth of weariness that Sky couldn't possibly understand. "Yes," she said, the single word carrying the weight of a life sentence. "For now I am." That night, the smell of leather, sweat, and wintergreen oil filled the garage. It was Ava's church. Her father, Coach Alvarez, was a man carved from discipline and love. His face was a roadmap of a life spent in the ring, a small, silver scar bisecting his left eyebrow, a nose that had been broken and reset more times than he could count, but his eyes were kind and saw everything. He was showing a young boy named Leo how to keep his guard up. "Protect your face, Leo. Always. The chin is the off switch. You never let them touch the off switch," he said, tapping the boy's chin gently with a focus mitt. Later, as they ate a quiet dinner of chicken and rice, he studied his daughter over the rim of his water glass. He saw the new tension in her shoulders, the way she held her jaw tight. "Everything okay at the new school, Mija?" he asked, his voice soft. "It's fine, Pop," she lied, pushing a piece of chicken around her plate. He sighed, putting his fork down. He leaned forward, his forearms on the table. "You remember that old fight I showed you? The one with Hurricane Hector? Remember what I told you was the most important part?" Ava nodded. "Round 7. When he got knocked down but took the full 8 count to stand up. You said he wasn't just resting his body. He was resting his anger." "Exactly," her father said. He was hurt, he was mad, and he wanted to get up and swing for the fences. But he knew that if he fought with rage, he'd get sloppy. He'd lose. He looked at her pointedly. "I didn't teach you to fight so you could hurt people, Ava. I taught you so you would never have to be a victim of your own anger. Boxing is about control. Inside the ring, and more importantly, outside of it. Real strength," he said, tapping his temple, "is knowing when not to swing." She nodded, the words of familiar sermon. But his wisdom felt different now. It felt less like a shield and more like a cage. The next day at school, the testing escalated. A low whistle from down the hall as she walked by. Nash's voice, just loud enough for her to hear. "Yo, new girl is thick under that hoodie." They stood in a group, blocking her path to the water fountain, forcing her to turn around and walk the long way. Each incident was a small poke, a calculated jab designed to find a weak spot, to make her flinch. On the outside, she was a stone wall. But on the inside, the pressure was building, a storm gathering behind her eyes. She was running out of room to contain it. Before we see what happens next, we're curious. Where are you all watching from today? And more importantly, what are you feeling for Ava right now? Let us know down in the comments. It's a tough spot for anyone to be in, and it feels like something is about to break. The bell shrieked, a piercing sound that signaled the end of third period English. The classroom, which had been simmering with restless energy, immediately erupted. Backpacks were zipped, chairs scraped against the floor. Miss Reyes, the young teacher who still carried the optimistic shine of someone who believed she could make a difference, was trying to talk over the din. Don't forget, your essays on thematic conflict are due Friday. Please read the rubric. Trent Walker was already holding court in the back, laughing loudly and ignoring her completely. He'd spent the entire class period quietly tormenting the students around him, flicking paper, whispering insults, while Miss Reyes struggled to maintain order. She was new and Trent had marked her as weak from the first week. Ava was at her desk, methodically organizing her books into a neat pile. She was trying to be the last one out to avoid the chaotic crush in the hallway. She leaned over to pick up a pen that had rolled under her chair, her back to the main aisle. Her hoodie, which was her constant shield, rode up just an inch or two, revealing the curve of her waist and the dark denim of her jeans. She felt a presence behind her. A sudden shift in the air. The scent of Trent's cologne. Then it happened. Smack. The sound was sharp, loud, and obscene. It was an ugly crack that cut through the classroom noise like a whip, followed by a sudden, shocked silence, which was then shattered by a wave of snickering that grew into an avalanche of open laughter. Ava froze. Her entire body went rigid, every muscle locking into place. A hot, electric sting bloomed across her left buttock, a profound violation that sent a shockwave of pure, white-hot fury through her system. She didn't need to turn around. She knew it was Trent. She could feel his smug, arrogant energy radiating behind her like heat off asphalt. "Damn, Walker!" Nash howled with laughter from a few desks away, his voice dripping with sycophantic glee. "Did you see that jiggle?" Replay of the day. Ava remained bent over, her face hidden from the class, her world narrowing to a single point of burning humiliation. Every cell in her body, every fiber of muscle she had spent years training screamed at her to act. To stand. To turn. To unleash the inferno that was now roaring in her chest, demanding release. The combinations came to her mind, unbidden, a phantom dance of devastating precision. A pivot on the ball of her right foot. A short, sharp jab to his solar plexus to steal his breath and his laughter. A perfectly torqued cross to the point of his jaw to silence him for good. She could do it in less than 3 seconds. She could drop him right here in front of everyone and it would be over. But then she saw it again. The ghost of Mark's bloody lip. The stark white of the expulsion letter. Her mother's face crumbling in on itself. Her father's heavy, crushing silence. Her hands, hidden from view under the desk, were trembling. Not with fear. They were trembling with the effort of containment, with the sheer force of will it took to hold back a hurricane. "Did you see that?" It was Sky's voice, a blade of pure outrage cutting through the laughter. She was on her feet, her chair pushed back, pointing a trembling finger at Trent. "Miss Reyes, he just slapped her. He assaulted her. Are you going to do something or what?" Every eye in the room swiveled to the teacher. Miss Reyes looked panicked, her face pale, her authority completely gone. She looked from Sky's furious expression to Trent's casual, unbothered shrug. "It was just a joke, Miss Reyes," Trent said, his voice as smooth as oil. He gifted her a charming, practiced smile that had gotten him out of trouble 1,000 times before. "We're just playing around. Lighten up." "Right, Ava?" He was talking to her back. The entire class was holding its breath, waiting for her response. All she had to do was stand up, mumble "it's fine," and let it go. Let them win. Survive? Slowly, deliberately, as if moving through deep water, Ava stood up. She did not look at Trent. She did not look at Miss Reyes. She did not look at anyone. She gathered her books, her movement stiff and robotic. Her face was a blank, emotionless mask, a carefully constructed dam holding back a flood of rage. Without a single word, she walked out of the classroom. The laughter had died down, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable silence. As she crossed the threshold into the blessedly empty hallway, she let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding since the moment of impact. It came out as a ragged, silent sob. She stumbled to a small alcove by the water fountains, leaned against the cool wall, her books clutched to her chest like a shield, and waited for the world to stop shaking. The heavy bag in the garage swung violently, its chain groaning in protest with each concussive impact. Thwack! 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 Ava's fists were a blur, a rhythmic engine of destruction fueled by shame and fury. Sweat dripped from her forehead, running down her temples and stinging her eyes. This wasn't practice. This wasn't training. This was an exorcism. She was trying to punch the memory of the slap out of her body. She was trying to beat back the sound of the laughter, the feeling of 30 pairs of eyes on her, the suffocating weight of her own restraint. Her knuckles were raw, the skin split and bleeding, staining the gray canvas of the bag with small, dark blossoms. She didn't feel the pain. All she felt was the rage, a white-hot fire that had finally burned through its containment. She hit the bag again and again, the image of Trent's smug face superimposed on the leather. The side door to the garage creaked open, flooding the dusty space with the soft light of the setting sun. Coach Alvarez stood there, a bag of groceries in one hand. He stopped, his face a mixture of concern and understanding. He didn't say anything at first. He just set the groceries down and watched his daughter, his quiet, disciplined daughter, trying to tear a 100-pound bag from its chain. Finally, he walked over and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Ava. His voice was quiet, but it cut through her rage. She stopped mid-swing, her chest heaving, her breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. Tears of frustration and anger mixed with the sweat on her face. The words came out, choked and broken. He slapped me, Pop. Her voice was a whisper, but it was filled with all the humiliation she had swallowed. In front of the whole class. And they all laughed. And I did nothing. He pulled her into a hug, his strong arms a familiar fortress. He held her as the whole story spilled out, the weeks of taunts, the shove, the book, the slap, and her agonizing, suffocating decision to do nothing. As he held her, a memory surfaced, sharp and clear. The locker room at her old school. The arrogant smirk on Mark's face. The split second before her fist flew. And the feeling immediately after. Not pride. Not victory. A cold, hollow sickness in her gut. The realization that she had lost control, that she had become the very thing her father had warned her against. A brawler, not a boxer. I didn't fight back, she confessed into his shirt, her voice muffled. I was so scared. Not of him. I was scared of what I would do to him. I was scared of being that person again. Her dad pulled back, holding her at arm's length. He looked her straight in the eye, his gaze steady and deep. Listen to me, Mija. That power in your hands, that's not who you are. The violence is not you. He tapped her chest right over her heart. You are the choice. You are the one who decides when and how. The discipline I taught you isn't just about holding back. It's about knowing when letting go is the right thing to do. It's about fighting for the right reason. It's about control. Your control. You decide what the rules are now. The next day at school, the air was thick with whispers. Ava felt the eyes on her as she walked the halls, 100 tiny spotlights. Sky found her before first period, her expression grim. It's bad, Ava, she said, her voice low. She held up her phone. Nash filmed the whole thing. The slap. You walking out. It's already been shared in 3 different group chats. It's all over the place. Ava stared at the shaky video on the small screen. She saw herself, a faceless girl in a gray hoodie, absorbing the hit, absorbing the humiliation. She saw Trent laughing, preening for the camera. She heard the chorus of mockery. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on her. Everyone thinks you're weak, Sky said, her voice laced with a fierce, protective anger. They think you're a victim. They think he can do whatever he wants. Ava looked up from the phone. The fog of shame and fear in her mind had finally cleared. In its place was a cold, hard clarity. A decision had settled in her soul, solid and unshakable. Her father's words echoed in her mind. You are the choice. I'm not a victim, she said, her voice quiet, but with an edge of steel that Sky had never heard before. Sky met her gaze and a slow, hopeful smile spread across her face. I know you're not. So why don't you show them what a fighter looks like? Ava is at a crossroads. The choice she makes next will change everything. And if you want to see how this story of strength and justice unfolds, take a moment right now to subscribe to the channel. We believe in stories like this and we post them every single week. The final bell was a starting gun. The hallways instantly flooded with a river of students flowing toward the freedom of the exits. Ava moved against the current. Her walk was different now. Her head was up. Her steps were deliberate, each one landing with purpose. She was heading toward the gym. She knew they would be there. Jocks lived and breathed in the space between the weight room and the basketball court, a kingdom built on sweat and ego. She was right. Trent was leaning against a wall near the gym entrance, holding court with Nash and Cooper. He was basking in his newfound notoriety, reenacting the slap for a small, laughing audience of acolytes. He swished his hand through the air with theatrical flair. Nash had his phone out, filming again. Of course he did. They were building their brand on her humiliation. Trent saw her approaching. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. He thought she was coming to plead. To cry. To give him more material for his next viral video. He pushed off the wall and took a step toward her, deliberately blocking her path. Well, look who it is, he said loudly, his voice projecting to the gathered crowd. Came back for more, sweetheart? Couldn't get enough? He chuckled, a sound that grated on Ava's last nerve. We can do a retake for the camera if you want. Get your good side this time. He made a show of looking her up and down. His hand came up, reaching for her, a sick pantomime of affection. Come on, just a little grab for the views. That was the moment. The line. The choice. Her father's words echoed in her mind, not as a warning, but as a permission slip. You are the choice. And she chose. Everything slowed down. The noisy hallway faded into a dull roar. The world narrowed to the space between them. She saw the overconfidence in his eyes, the lazy way his weight was shifted forward, leaving him completely open. Her body moved before her mind had a chance to second-guess. It was pure, fluid muscle memory, a violent ballet she had practiced 1,000 times. She didn't step back. She stepped in, closing the distance. She slipped under his reaching arm, her feet pivoting on the polished floor, her body coiling like a spring. Her left hand came up in a short, brutal hook to his gut. It wasn't a wild swing, it was a precise, surgical strike, tucked and tight, aimed directly at his solar plexus. Hoof! The air exploded from Trent's lungs in a pained, surprised gasp. His eyes went wide with shock and agony. His smug expression dissolved into a mask of disbelief. He doubled over, his body folding around the point of impact. But she was already in motion. The first punch was a setup. As his head came down, her right hand was already on its way. A clean, perfectly thrown cross connected with the side of his jaw. There was a sickening crack that was both sharp and wet. Trent's eyes rolled back in his head, and he crumpled to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. He was unconscious before he hit the ground. It was over in 2 punches. Less than 3 seconds. Nash, who had been filming, stared in dumbstruck horror. His phone, still recording, clattered from his nerveless fingers to the floor. His brain finally caught up, and his shock curdled into rage. You psycho bitch, he screamed and lunged at her. His attack was a clumsy, telegraphed rush fueled by adrenaline and ego. He swung a wide, sloppy punch. Ava ducked under it with ease, the wind from his fist brushing her hair. As she came up from the duck, she drove the heel of her palm upward, a short, sharp strike connecting squarely with the bridge of his nose. There was another wet crunching sound. Nash staggered back, a hand flying to his face, a choked, gurgling cry escaping his lips. Blood poured through his fingers. He stumbled away, blinded by pain and tears. Cooper, who had been frozen against the wall like a statue, simply let out a small squeak of terror, turned, and ran. He didn't even look back. He tripped over his own feet, scrambled up, and disappeared down the hall like a frightened rabbit. Silence. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 12 seconds. The crowd of students that had gathered was completely, utterly silent. Jaws were slack. Eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and awe. Ava stood in the center of the quiet chaos, her breathing steady, her body thrumming with adrenaline. She looked down at Trent's unconscious form, then at Nash whimpering on the floor. She felt no satisfaction. No triumph. Just a quiet, cold calm. The storm inside her was finally still. She had done what needed to be done. She turned and walked away. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. Behind her, a single, distinct sound broke the silence. A slow, deliberate clap. And then another. And another. It was Sky. A huge, proud, triumphant grin was spreading across her face. The aftermath was pure chaos, a digital wildfire. Within an hour, the video of the 12-second takedown had eclipsed the video of the slap. It was shot from a dozen different angles, replayed in slow motion, and dissected in group chats across the school. The quiet girl in the gray hoodie was gone. In her place was a legend, an urban myth. "Did you see that boxing chick?" was the question on everyone's lips. The rumors were wild. She was a Golden Gloves champion. Her father was a secret MMA fighter. She'd broken Trent's jaw in 3 places. The call from the principal's office was inevitable. Ava sat in the same cold plastic chair she remembered from her last school. This time, however, she wasn't shaking. She was perfectly still, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Across from her, Trent sat with a large ice pack held to his swollen, purple jaw, his father by his side. Mr. Walker was a man who radiated an aura of expensive cologne and unchecked privilege. He was a prominent member of the school board, and his face was flushed with a dangerous combination of anger and embarrassment. "I want her expelled," Mr. Walker demanded, his voice booming in the small wood-paneled office. "She assaulted my son. Viciously. Look at his face. We will be pressing charges. This girl is a menace." The principal, a tired-looking man named Mr. Davison, who seemed perpetually overwhelmed, looked at Ava. "Miss Moreno, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Before Ava could speak, the door opened. Miss Reyes stood there, clutching her tote bag to her chest like a shield. She looked nervous, but her eyes were full of a newfound determination. "I do," she said, her voice shaking slightly but clear. "I have something to say." She walked in and placed her phone on the principal's polished desk. "This is the first video, Mr. Davison. The one from my classroom yesterday. The one where Trent Walker sexually harasses and assaults Ava in front of 30 students while his friend films it for laughs." She took a deep breath and looked directly at Mr. Walker. "And this wasn't the first time. I have statements from 3 other girls about similar incidents. This wasn't a fight. This was self-defense against a serial predator who had been bullying her for weeks." Just then, another figure appeared at the door, seeming to fill the entire frame. Coach Alvarez. He walked in, his presence immediately shifting the balance of power in the room. He didn't look angry. He looked grave. He didn't even glance at Ava. He stared directly at Trent's father, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Your son put his hands on my daughter," he said. His voice was low and even, but it carried more weight than all of Mr. Walker's shouting. "He humiliated her. He assaulted her. And you're not mad about that. You're mad because my daughter, the one I taught to respect herself, hit back harder than he was expecting." He finally turned his gaze to the principal. "You have a choice here, sir. You can punish the victim for finally standing up for herself, and in doing so, tell every other bully in this school that they have free rein. Or you can finally deal with the rot that you've been letting grow in your hallways." The result was a messy, bureaucratic compromise. To appease the influential Mr. Walker, both Trent and Ava were suspended for 3 days pending a full review. It was frustrating, but Ava accepted it with the same calm she had carried since the fight. As she walked out of the school, her father's arm resting protectively on her shoulder, a girl she'd only ever seen in the library stopped her. "Hey," the girl said, her eyes wide with respect. "That was amazing." Another girl joined her, a freshman with braces. "My ex-boyfriend used to grab me like that. He always said it was just a joke." She looked at Ava, her expression deadly serious. "Can you teach me how to do that punch?" Ava looked from one girl to the other, and then saw 2 more hovering nearby, listening. She saw the same look in all their eyes. It wasn't a desire for violence. It was a hunger to feel safe. A desire to own their own space. For the first time, she saw a path forward that wasn't about hiding her strength, but about sharing it. 3 days later, Ava was reinstated. The review board, armed with Miss Reyes's testimony, a half-dozen witness statements from other girls who had been harassed by Trent's crew, and the undeniable video evidence, cleared her of any wrongdoing. Trent returned to school with a 2-week in-school suspension, mandatory counseling, and being stripped of his varsity letter. His father's influence had saved him from expulsion, but it couldn't save him from what he truly lost. His power was gone. It had been built on a foundation of fear and intimidation, and Ava had demolished it in 12 seconds. He walked the halls differently now. His shoulders were slumped. His arrogant swagger was replaced by a quiet, haunted shuffle. He didn't meet anyone's eyes, least of all Ava's. When they passed in the hallway once, he flinched and practically flattened himself against the lockers to get away from her. Nash returned to school with a brace on his nose and a newfound passion for sitting in the back of every class. Cooper acted as if he had never even known Trent. The pack had been scattered. Sky, beaming with a pride that was almost maternal, had an idea. "You have to do it, Ava. It's your duty now," she said, half joking but completely serious. Start a club. A self-defense class. Look at them. She gestured to the hallway, where girls would nod at Ava with a quiet, powerful respect. You started something. Now you have to finish it. And so, with a surprisingly enthusiastic Miss Reyes as the faculty sponsor, the Northgate Women's Self-Defense and Empowerment Club was born. The first meeting was held in the dusty auxiliary gym. Ava was nervous. She expected 5 or 6 girls to show up. 35 came. They were from every corner of the school's social ecosystem. Jocks in Letterman jackets, shy artistic girls, brainy members of the debate team, even a few cheerleaders still in their uniforms. All of them looked at her with the same hopeful, expectant expression. Ava stood before them, taking a deep breath. She wasn't wearing her hoodie. For the first time, she felt completely herself. Hi everyone, she started, her voice clear and steady, carrying across the quiet gym. Thanks for coming. First thing you need to know is that this isn't about fighting. This isn't about learning how to hurt people. She looked around the room, meeting their eyes one by one. This is about control. Your control. It's about learning to carry yourself so you never have to fight. It's about stance. It's about awareness. It's about knowing, deep in your bones, that you have a right to your own space. She paused, letting the word sink in. It's about never, ever feeling helpless again. She showed them the first move. Not a punch, but a stance. How to stand with their feet grounded, their center of gravity low, their posture open but strong. How to occupy their space with unshakable confidence. She watched as they mirrored her, their initial awkwardness slowly giving way to a new solidity. Sky moved through the group, offering encouragement. That's it. Feel the floor under your feet. You're not a guest here, you own this spot, she said, tapping a girl's shoulder. Ava watched them. She watched a quiet girl named Maya, who had been one of Trent's previous targets, find her footing and stand tall for the first time. She watched them practice turning and creating distance, their voices growing stronger as they shouted, no. It was more powerful than any punch. The beast she had tried so hard to cage wasn't a monster. It was a guardian. And it was finally free, not to destroy, but to protect. It was the last week of school, the air thick and sweet with the promise of summer. Ava walked through the same hallways she had once navigated like a minefield. Now they were just hallways. Her head was high. Her hoodie was a distant memory. People still looked at her, but the looks had changed. The fear and awe had softened into a quiet, easy respect. She smiled back. She saw one of the boys from the football team start to catcall a freshman girl, then catch himself when he saw Ava looking. He mumbled an apology and walked away. Her presence had changed the very air in the school. Outside, by the bike racks where the afternoon sun cast long shadows, Trent Walker stood alone. He saw her, and for a moment he looked like he was going to bolt. But he didn't. He took a deep breath, a visible effort, and walked over to her. His face was healed, but the bruises were still there, deep in his eyes. Hey, he said, his voice quiet, almost raspy. He couldn't meet her gaze, focusing instead on the scuffed toe of his own shoe. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. Ava stood silently, her arms crossed, waiting. She wasn't going to make this easy for him. I thought it was funny, he mumbled, the words thick with a shame that was clearly a new and uncomfortable emotion for him. I thought it made me look cool. I never thought about how it made you feel. Or anyone. He finally looked up, and for the first time, she saw not the bully, but the broken, insecure boy he'd been all along. I was wrong. I was just wrong. He had finally learned the difference between power and strength. Ava nodded slowly. She didn't offer him the easy comfort of forgiveness. She didn't say it's okay. She gave him the simple, unvarnished truth. It wasn't a joke to me. He nodded, accepting it. It was the truth he deserved. I know, he said softly. He turned and walked away, a ghost of the king he used to be. The cycle for him was broken. The final scene isn't in the school. It's in the garage, her sanctuary. The familiar, comforting smell of leather and sweat hangs in the air. Ava is taping her fists, the white athletic tape wrapping around her knuckles in a clean, practiced, meditative ritual. But she's not alone. Her father is there, holding focus mitts for a small girl no older than 10, with fierce, determined eyes. The girl throws a 1-2 combination, a little clumsy but full of heart. Good. Now move your feet. Don't get stuck in the mud. Coach Alvarez encourages her, his voice warm. He looks over at Ava and smiles, a deep, proud smile that reaches his eyes. She smiles back. She walks over, kneels down, and gently adjusts the young girl's elbow. "Keep it tucked in like this," she says, her voice patient and kind. "The power doesn't come from your arm. It comes from the ground. Feel it." The little girl nods, her face serious with concentration, and throws another punch. It's sharper, stronger. Ava watches her, and then looks at the dozen other girls waiting their turn, all of them part of the new youth program she and her dad started. Strength wasn't in the fist. It was in the choice. It wasn't in the knockout. It was in the teaching. She used to think strength was something you had to prove inside a ring, under bright lights, with a crowd roaring. But now she knew. Real strength is what you walk with. Every single day. Ava found her strength by choosing to share it. If you love stories about underdogs who rise up to find their purpose, we've put a playlist of our very best ones in a pinned comment right below. Click on it to keep watching and never forget the power you carry inside you.